These are the learning outcomes. They're brief and to the point because we've got 3 hours, just under. So what we're going to do is consolidate your understanding of the social graces, develop your understanding of the relevance of the social graces to your role as an employer or supervisor in supporting staff, enhance your confidence in understanding how the social graces underpin person-centered, strengths-based and systemic approaches, and develop your ability to use social graces and systemic approaches in case management discussions. Okay. The first half, we'll be looking at what the social graces are and why they are important to the Coventry area at the moment, and why they're going to be important in the future in professional practice. And the second half, we'll be looking more at how you actually might apply them as a manager, how you might get involved with your staff and people whom you supervise. Okay. So this is just a bit of background about the social graces. They were developed in the 1990s, came out of systemic family-centered work. And what they were looking at was the problem of how you could, within family work, you're looking at a group of people, but how you could identify individuality in that group of people in terms of their behavior, their experience, and their identities, as well as their beliefs and values, and how they could be worked on and worked with in groups. And it's developed since then. And the acronym, which I'll show you the full meaning of if you haven't come across it before, I'll show you the full meaning of it on the next slide, picks up on different aspects of our identities that are different between individuals and that affect how we interact with people, how we behave when we meet people. And as you'll see later on, they can be visible or invisible, and they can be spoken about or not spoken about. Some of them you can see with people, others you can't. And some people are willing to talk about and at times, and other times they're not willing to talk about, or other people aren't willing to talk about them or are willing to talk about them. So what we're trying to do is by naming them, by naming the graces, it allows things to be explored. It's also a way of identifying biases, because we all have biases, often in favor of the aspects of identity that we recognize, that we feel comfortable with, and biased against those that we don't feel comfortable with. So what we're really talking about here is how we handle power differences in the way we interact with and work with people who are citizens, customers of Coventry City Council. And it's about reflecting back on that as well as practitioners. Okay. And in terms of the people you work with, it's by breaking it down into those kind of parts, it helps people to explore things more fully. Things they might not usually talk about, might not feel comfortable talking about, or that you might feel a bit uncomfortable asking them about. It enables you to move forward and ask more specific questions. And it's a crucial part of this is that it can be about challenging what we call dominant discourses, that certain voices, certain attitudes and approaches dominate in society. Coventry will be no different, and it's about challenging that and encouraging, supporting people whose voices aren't usually heard to be heard. Okay, let's move on then to the first task. We've got a couple of 2 or 3 sessions in breakout rooms that I'm going to send you off to. On the right hand side here, you'll see the graces made out. Now you'll see it's called graces because there are aspects of identity that begin with those letters. So you've got 2 under G for gender and gender identity and geography, running right through religion and race, down to sexuality, sexual orientation and spirituality. And you'll see when you look down that list why we said they are things that can be spoken about or not spoken about, and that can be visible, easily seen, or invisible. And they are the things I want you to think about first when we go into the breakout room, just looking at that list. I'm going to put this slide into the breakout room with you when you go. And the task is, what we're trying to do in Coventry is roll out the use of social graces, and the task for you as managers and supervisors is to model that process. Okay, and to share the willingness to take a reflective and reflexive approach, thinking about social graces yourselves, not simply for the people that you work with and you supervise, but for yourselves, how it affects you, how you interact with each other and with them and with other people. And look at the social graces and work through the following questions with your colleagues in the group. And each of you I'd like each of you to identify which are the most important to you currently, and then think about that as a group as well. Which are the most important to you currently, and why are they important? And which are least important to you currently, and why? Now, some groups have come back out of this session and sort of come back and said they're all important. Well, yeah, but I don't want you to do that. I want you to actually pick two and say why. Yeah. So if anybody comes back and tries to say, oh, they're all important, I'll say, think of two. Okay. So please be ready when you come back with two, because it's important that you do from the point of view of the conversation discussion we're having. So two most important, two least important, and then think about how this might affect your work. Okay. When you come back, I'll ask each group to please appoint a spokesperson, and I'll ask them to feedback. I will record your feedback on a whiteboard, okay, which I'll then put into the chat for you, a copy of it into the chat for this room, and you can take it away with you. Because the purpose of today, at the end of today, is for you to have ideas to take away to apply in your practice with the people you supervise. Okay, that is the key idea today, not just the learning, but to take it away. So we're starting by building what you know at the moment and what you think at the moment. Anybody got any questions? Checking.
Yeah.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to be sort of a bit formal about this. It's just because it's easier to do at this stage. So room one, which is, I will tell you who's in room one. Deborah, Debbie, Jason, Dawn, and Paula. Which two did you say were the most important?
Well, what we what we did, we discussed it. We all had different opinions really, so we didn't try to come to an overall opinion. We just discussed each one of ours, really.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, shall I go first, and the rest of the room maybe of my room maybe. Okay. So for me,
just to say, I might write some of this down. I've got this. Okay. I'm not going to write everything down if it's personal.
So just for me,
Okay.
Just for me, right. I think this is really. I mean, they're all important, but I just think in terms of what I'm thinking about at the minute, I think gender identity, and I think just really in terms of, I think obviously, it's really important that we have equality for women and trans people, but I think we need to be more careful about when we talk about men. Really, we've got these figures about men are more likely to be higher suicide rate, more lower life expectancy, more susceptible to mental illness certain ways. And obviously you've got threats like toxic masculinity, and obviously I work in children's services, and there's a problem with gangs and criminal exploitation there as well. And I just think we should be careful when we talk about gender identity to sort of just in how we address sort of men really. And for me as well, I think employment at the minute, I think it's in the news about more people should be, but it's just not as easy as all that really. So I think that's one for me. So I'll go on to the rest of the group now.
Anybody want to add anything in the group to that? Anything that Jason said?
Right,
disagree with them, contradict him if you want. I don't mind.
Okay, no, that's okay. I'll go next. It's what we find is throughout the group, as we went through, there wasn't a consensus because everyone was coming at it from their personal angle. And what we sort of started discussing is if you put yourself in the context of work and then put yourself in the context of outside of work, you could actually come in a completely angle, and your experiences in both environments will mold your answers. So we had gender, as Paul said, we had different answers from gender identity. We had religion. We had someone saying appearance as their least, whereas another person said appearance is their what would considered as most important, and they were going on personal experiences. So that was the thing that we couldn't. I know you wanted us to pinpoint down, but we found that really difficult to do for that.
That's really good. I mean, I'm going to say to you, I'll let the cat out of the bag. I deliberately did that because so groups have come back and just, it's everything else, but I wanted to pit and said, they all matter. That's what they meant, was it's split across the group, and that needs to be brought out, because that is really the part of the purpose of the day. You've said you are all, not surprisingly, you've got different things that you, I think, are important.
Yeah.
Every single one of you, from a professional point of view, there might be things that the organisation has, but from a personal point of view, you've all got home lives and on your own professional experience, your personal experience, that affects what you think is important.
Yes.
Yeah, every single one of you, which is what you've told me, which is fine. Any group experience anything differently to that? Any of the other rooms?
We did.
No, we figured that out quite quickly. We'll be honest.
Harmony didn't break out then. You differences of opinion. Yeah. Anybody?
A lot about on in our group we did. I mean, we did agree, like, it covered everything, but we also focused a lot on age, just because it was really relevant to a lot of us in that group for different reasons. A lot of us have been in our careers for quite a long time, where we're at in our life. Also, the age workforce is increasing. People are working longer. We've got someone 73 in our team at the moment doing a great job. Also looking at where we're at in our careers, and also the differences of when you're going into middle age, like myself, and not one of the young guns anymore, and just the dynamics with that at work and stuff.
Age and dynamic, that's great, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to put that one in because that might come up in discussions later on. Please believe me, you're a young man.
Thank
I know
you.
that. I was you once. It's what you say is really important, though, because there are issues in society that are important across the piece, but as well as the individuals that we all are with our issues of importance. I think that's a significant one. It's interesting how often age has come up, and especially in terms of work as well. I received my letter the other week inviting me to apply for my state pension, which came as, although it was expected, still came as quite a shock. When it drops on the doormat, you think, no, come on. But it's true, and that's going to happen more and more. As you say, more and more older people are going to be in work. That's going to affect how you work. It will provide advantages in some ways, but disadvantages in others, and difficulties in others. So and across society, we see massive change. We'll talk about that more as we go through the morning, because that's what this is about. Which two were the least important? I'll ask room 2.
Can I just bring up one of the things that was quite important to our group?
You can, Terry.
So we're on about ability and neurodiversity, and how, where we are in society and education now, how we're all becoming more aware and gaining more knowledge about the impact that that's having, and actually how that links into a lot of different characters that kind of sit under the graces.
Thank you. And I think that's one thing that's come out, hasn't it, in the past 5 to 10 years. We've got an aging society. We've also got a society where we realise that people are more neurodiverse than we thought. And as we get more knowledge, we become aware of these things. It's these. I guess that the social graces and what they represent have come out of increased knowledge, increasingly diverse societies, and increased knowledge about people and how we are. And that's why it's so important. It's a way of capturing all that, if you like, so that we can do the best job we can. Thank you, Terry. Anybody in room 2? That was Lucy, Victoria, Catherine, Tessa, and Thomas. Some of you have spoken already. Which 2 were the least important, did you think?
I did say I'd speak on this one if I was, but so I'll do it. But we talked about geography. I'm presuming the context of that is about where people are from, the area they're living in. Didn't feel that had a bearing in terms of work. I mean, in terms of like staffing and things like that, that wasn't on our radar as something that's really important. And appearance. I mean, once you start talking about it, then you start actually saying, well, it is quite important in case. But yeah, initially, yeah, people say it's tricky. I think we felt like that about everything, really. Once you start, and you can see there's a counter argument to everything. But
didn't seem important, but there could be a counter argument. I'll put that down.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Thomas. Thank you. Anybody want to add anything to that? Any of the other groups? Was there something that really struck you as being least important? From a personal point of view.
I'm going to say sexuality, purely for me, because it's no one's business but my business.
Okay. Right.
So I didn't think that was going to be important, but obviously if you're dealing with a service user, it can be important, or other members of staff, it can be important to them. But that was me personally. Yeah.
And what you've just said is really, really important, I think. Who was it that spoke? Was it Veronica?
Yes.
Yes, that was you. Yes, Veronica. Hi. That from that personal point of view, it is nobody else's business. And yet, in a work setting, it could be that other people could be, the issues of sexuality can be important for other people, and how they're treated, how they feel, and because service users, exactly what you said. I mean, we all know. And therefore, so for us, it might not seem significant. For me, I'm a white male heterosexual. To me, in this society, my sexuality is not an issue. It's there. But for other people with different sexuality, that can be different sexual relationships. That can be a real issue for them. And that's and they're saying that's the difference. For me, it doesn't matter, but to other people, it might well matter. We'll draw that out as we go later on about how we actually deal with things that seem to be unimportant to us, potentially, or private to us, and how we can actually work with that with service users and with our staff. Okay, but thank you, Veronica. Really important point, I think. Anybody want to add anything else? I asked the third question about how this might affect your work. You've started to answer that as we've gone through the questions, because they overlap as usual with these things. Anybody want to add anything else, anybody from any group, about how this might affect your work that we've not discussed so far? How might it affect what you do?
I mean, personal experience.
Everything.
I think B was in first, so I think slightly made it before you, Terry. I'll come to you next. Okay. It is B. I'm pronouncing your name right.
It's Asma. B was.
I do apologise. Okay. That's all right.
That's okay.
Apologise, Asma. Thank you. Yep.
That's okay.
Okay.
I think personal experiences, how in whichever context they've been, whether they've been in work or whether they've been in personal life, will affect the way you interact, the way you're molded, your attitudes and behaviors, and actually it could be your leadership management style, how you interact with staff, and sometimes it could even affect your levels of compassionateness, if that's a word, because your experiences, if you if you can personalize certain experience. Sorry, I'm not getting my words out right. If you can personalize certain interactions that you've had, or elements that you've dealt with, you sort of can influence the way you behave, and you can actually respond to certain situations within the workplace a lot better. So in that sense.
Yeah. So greater awareness can help professional response. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Asma. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you want to add any more, or is that all you wanted to say?
That's all. Thank you.
That's all. Thank you. Terry, you wanted to come in next.
I mean, I very much echo kind of what's just been said, along with things like, aiding with conscious bias, the way that kind of we think about people, not discriminating, ensuring that we all have a collective value and goal. And all of this needs to be taken into consideration to create a strong working team. Because being included and our services being inclusive is what we strive for, and we need to be aware. Can't always correct everything, but we need to be aware that, you know, if we haven't been as respectful as what we should do, it should be identified as such, so we take ownership of that and we learn moving forward. There's no point just being like, oh, I'm perfect, I know, do you know, like, there's no subtle racism in my team. That would be arrogant. It's about identifying the fact that this is a thing, we identify it as such, and we try and make it better as we move forward.
Try to get the words down, you're feeling down. That's all right, Terry. About this, the first bit was needs to be taken into consideration. Let me make sure I get that right. For example, unconscious bias and inclusivity. I'm just summarising, and it should help us to take ownership and accept. There was. I'll summarise the last bit you said. You mentioned subtle racism, that kind of thing. There was one example. How would you like me to phrase it on the screen?
Oh, I don't mind how you want to phrase it. We need to accept that we're not perfect, and we need to grow and you know, and call it for what it is, and try and you know, do better at it.
Yeah.
Don't excuse it.
Right.
Oh, it's always been like that, so it will always be like that. You know, that well, we've always called her her. I was like, yeah, but they identify as they them now. Don't just excuse it. You know, like, own it.
Yeah. I'll put a note on about that as well. You'll see on the screen I'm moving things around. Right. I think that's great. Thank you, Terry. We'll have a discussion at the end. Just note the questions on the right. Has anything come up in that video that you hadn't thought about before? Anything you really connected with, or anything that felt completely alien to you, and anything that will inform your role in the implementation of the framework? We've used the word framework as a catch-all phrase for the social graces. Okay.
The development of the social graces is a real contribution to social work from systemic therapy, and it gives you a way to really begin to unpick issues about differential power, both within the service, within families, and in wider society. The Graces is a mnemonic, and it stands for a number of different positions, if you like, which might describe people, which confers on them positions of power or disables them from positions of power. For example, as a white woman, I have the grace of gender and of race, and those two aspects both enable me and disable me in different contexts. One of the things that's really important is naming these differences, and the idea is that if you name them, it's on the table, you've identified the power differential between you and the family or you and the client, and you can explore what the effects of that are. So for a social worker who is going to be working with a wide variety of different families from many different cultures, many different colours, many different religions, identifying those kind of differences and exploring them can really make a difference to your connection with the family, and it can really give them the opportunity to get into an expert position about their culture and their experience and the way they see the world. So, I mean, it fits with the concept of reflexivity, that the way that we think about the world is so tied up with our position within it. And in order to challenge our very basic assumptions about what is reality, what is the world, what does it mean to be a person. The Graces is a kind of gentle way into those kind of questions.
About if we're going to achieve the kind of thing some of you have been talking about engaging people from other backgrounds who aren't traditionally engaged by services. Some are receiving services. We can see that from the stats, but not in sufficient numbers, and it depends what type of services they are receiving, and then engaging with services and us engaging with them. This is what we're thinking about in terms of social graces, because your role as supervisors and managers is going to be about convincing, persuading your staff, encouraging and supporting them. And this is across the whole of groups, not just I picked 3 groups there. One way of looking at the diversity of Coventry. Very simply, I brought it down simply when I put that together. But across the piece of all the social graces, it's about modelling behaviour as well, practicing. How do you do this? How do you build rapport with people about talking about these issues? How do you do it respectfully? How do you have conversations? And how do you do it when you're being culturally conscious and curious? And the discussions that I've heard in the room the past 10-15 minutes indicated that that's the kind of thing that you're thinking of. You're concerned about, you're wondering about how it works, how you're going to make it happen. Okay, so that's just they're the kind of building blocks for bringing up the social graces and working within that kind of context, using them to support your supervision and to support your staff, helping them to introduce this process into practice. And I'm going to put you into groups and say, where do you think power and privilege impact on the experience and capabilities of your team members? We started to think about this already. And on the experience of citizens accessing social care services in Coventry. So how does power and privilege work in this process currently that they're not engaging? Is something happening there? And what might be the role of social graces for your team members and in the management of their cases? And what elements do you think are missing from the social graces to help support your team members? And what criticisms and concerns do you have? Okay. So it's been thinking about when you come back. It's 5 to 11. Excellent. Okay, this is just looking a bit at intersectionality and some of the things we talked about earlier on. Age came up in your discussions, which are like ethnicity, gender, sexuality. All those things have come up in your discussions, but they're all different, and some of them are defined by birth, which you can't change. So my age cannot be changed, and my birth date cannot shift, and neither can yours. My ethnicity can't change. It is handed to me by my parents, basically, and there's not a lot I can do about that. Nothing at all. Other things evolve through life. So the gender we are can change. People's sexuality can change. People, as you get older, you realise that your sexuality changes, not in massively big ways necessarily, but it changes, and how you express your sexuality changes as you get older and go through life, or you have more and more experiences and meetings with people. So that evolves, and the ones which are influenced not so much by evolution, but by actual experience, contact with other people and with the things that happen in life, things like employment and geography. The employment shifts. No longer do we have the days when I first started work. 1977, I left school and I did a year before I went to university, and I worked in the drawing office of a small shipyard in West Yorkshire. And the end of my first week, I'll never forget it. A guy called Vic was retiring at 65. He joined when he was 15. So he'd spent 50 years every single day going into the shipyard, first as an apprentice joiner and worked right through his career as a joiner. That's all he'd done. Never worked anywhere else. I don't think you'll find that anymore anywhere in this country at all. It's a massive shift. So people's employment changes all the time, or regularly. We change our employment, some more than others, and that's often linked to geography as well. Education for a lot of people, or changing where you live for your work, right through society. So that experience changes the geographical context you're operating in, and also employment. It's just an example of it. Okay, so just be aware that some things. It's about being aware that some things are immutable, cannot change. Other things are flexible, and can change gradually or can change suddenly. Okay, but what I want to talk about, pick up on, is we talked before about a bit about which ones do we voice and not voice. I'm not going to ask you to do this. Okay, we've done it. We brought it up earlier on, which ones are important to you. But more than just important to you, it's which do we feel we can speak about. Really important point. And we've just been discussing it in the feedback about which graces do your staff members or the people you work with, the citizens, feel they can talk about, feel comfortable talking about, and which ones don't they talk about. Because in terms of service, offering a service to people, ideally you want to know as much as you can. And if you're working with somebody, let's say you're working with somebody who's a Muslim who is gay, and that person doesn't want to talk about it, how are you going to deal with that? Or it might be crucial that they talk about it, but they're a bit afraid of talking about it, and their family getting to know, or their friends getting to know. How are you going to deal with that? Because that will remain unvoiced. It's not something you can see necessarily. You might have an inkling from how they behave in general, but you might not know. You might not have any clue. And therefore, how are you going to handle that? And it's the delicate conversations you were talking about a few minutes ago, bringing those up. How can we discuss them? Because if you're going to provide a service for people that's effective, really you want to be considering it if you can. It could be very important to that person. It could be something less controversial, but still be as important to that person. Okay. And what people say is affected by where they are. So as you rightly picked up, some of your staff members particularly will not want to voice their issues, as we said, because they're afraid of the consequences, possibly. They're afraid of how it comes across. They're afraid they don't want people to know. They will say, quite rightly, it's none of their business. But in terms of professional practice, it could be a significant issue in how they interact with other people, how they respond, how they work with people. So when we're going through this bit, I'd like you to think about, I'm not going to have a full discussion about it, what do you know about the people who report directly to you? Which graces for your team are routinely voiced? We did a bit of this earlier on, feedback, it came out, but which ones are routinely voiced and which are not? Which ones do not get talked about? And what might the impact of that be? What might it be on your team, on that person as a practitioner, on the service users they work with, on your relationship with them as their supervisor, on the team and the overall organization? Because in some cases that people are working on, it could be crucial in terms of the service that people receive. Just think about it and be aware of it. As it says in the bottom right hand corner, you can never obliterate power differentials. They exist in society, all human societies. Some people are more powerful than others. Attempts have been made to remove it and they've never been fully successful, 100% successful in some places. But so they can never be obliterated, but making people's positions explicit and exploring their effects means that people can make better choices in their future actions. That's really what we're about. It's about that, helping people to make the better choices, us and the people you supervise and manage, helping people to make better choices. But the question is, if people aren't talking about these things in their own lives, what kind of barrier does it put up? What kind of barrier might it put up to the implementation of not just the social graces, but the services that you're talking about today? the kind of services that you're hinting that you might like to think about for the future. What you got on the screen in front of you on the slide is what resistance might there be about introducing this kind of change, any change, but this kind of change. And one of them we've got here is fear, disclosure of protected beliefs. That you're just all of us do. Your staff members will have beliefs that are protected by law, under employment law, the Equality Act, the Human Rights Act. The protected beliefs is part of that, but those all linked together. And people might be, for example, worried about disclosing their protected beliefs because they appear vulnerable, or they might think that this stuff isn't important. I'm focused on what we call the pragmatics. I just want the facts, and then I can, for this assessment, we can put a care package together, or we can decide where we go next. Or they don't see the point. Just 3 examples of what might happen. And so, well, how can this help me do my job? So that are just 3 facets of resistance to change that you might get. Okay. We're focusing on the top one in terms of the video because it's probably the most challenging one to work with. Okay. This video we've made, this is the first stage in the process. We've got Jeremy, who's the service manager. We've got Jenny, who's the team manager. She has concerns about David, who is a social worker. They've introduced the social graces, and one of his cases isn't going well. His case is Sophie, who, as you'll find out, is transgender. Okay, and we'll see that what's happening first is that the service manager is having a meeting, not a formal supervision, but a meeting to discuss things with Jenny, and David comes up as an issue, and it's about and the first part of the process is to talk through what are the manager's issues with it, and what can the manager do about that. Okay, and later on we're going to look at the role of the Jenny in supervision, short supervision with David. Okay. Can you just be aware on the right hand side of the questions, what are Jenny's main concerns in relation to the resistance from David and how she might address this with him? How might the graces be used to support the conversation Jenny needs to have with her team member? And what are your key reflections from this clip? I'll ask you about, think about the others, but I'll ask you about your key reflections at the end if anybody wants to contribute before we show the second video. Okay. Yeah, I think we should work through this together. Because I was really interested. You've said twice now that you're stuck.
Yeah.
And you're puzzled about what to do, and you've got an idea what this is about.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, when you say you're stuck,
yeah,
what is it? What is it for you? What is it that you feel unable to do?
I think my fear, and I think it's a fear. I think that I am worried that he has protected beliefs, which is absolutely correct, and,
Right.
and he has those rights legally under the Equalities Act to have a gender critical belief. I genuinely, I believe
Yes.
that.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
my concern is if I'm not careful enough in how I challenge that,
Right.
that I could be held accountable for discriminating against him.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think, do you know what, that is probably the nuts and bolts of it, if I'm honest.
Right. And that sounds genuine. I mean, that sounds genuine. You know, when you hear things, sometimes you think that's not really right, but that sounds like a good reason for you to be struggling with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you had situations before? Because I've managed you for a while, but you've had past history.
Not like,
Anytime where that's come up before and you've struggled,
No,
so not been able to deal with it, or you've
No,
found it difficult.
I've had it with a social worker who was from Northern Ireland, and the family felt that he was aggressive. He had
Right.
very heavy accent. He could be incredibly direct, and he was quite loud because he was his hearing wasn't brilliant. And I did speak to him about that, and he was a bit offended. But what I was trying to say was actually the family had complained, but also external colleagues had complained too. And, that helped a little bit because I think he saw then it wasn't me having a pop because he had a Northern Irish accent, but actually it was other people feel that you're a bit aggressive, that you're a bit in their face. And he said, well, that's my culture. And I said, and actually that was, and I was able to really dig into that. Yes, but this is the bit where we need to be that pale grey as social workers, that our cultural bit stays at the door.
Okay. Now you said that, can I just need to step in because you've said
Yeah.
that twice, and I just want to sort of talk about that a bit from your perspective, okay? I mean, you said we have to leave our culture at the door.
Yeah.
Is that what you do when you go in and see people? You try and leave it all behind?
I do. I think so. I think that sometimes we are more forgiving of things or harder on things depending on our upbringing. So
absolutely.
That's why when I was a front-facing social worker, Jeremy, I would always go out and see hoarders because I grew up with hoarders, so that was fine and it's never bothered me. Absolutely never bothered me. And I was always the go-to gal. Oh, we've got another order in, Joe. Yeah, I'll do it, no problem. So in some respects, I wasn't necessarily checking my values at the door there. What I was doing was actually, this is okay. Let's get to the trauma here. Let's try and work with you about having a different opportunity with how you're living. So I guess it's, that, but, I would struggle with somebody who was a thief, for example, who stole from another resident.
Yeah.
And I would have to, that's the bit that I would check in at the door. That's the bit where I would not be coming in telling you off because you've been nicking off your mate. So and I guess that's what I'm saying, those value judgmenty, judgy bits, they're the bits that you need to leave at the door.
Right. So, and that makes sense. So that's because it sounded like, and I might be wrong here, it sounded like you were saying you have to just forget everything and go in. No, you're not saying that. You're saying that it's about effectively what we do with the social graces, being aware of the impact they have on you when you go in.
Yeah.
Okay. So given that, and I'm just thinking about what you've done so far with David, what have you tried? You said you thought you tried to raise it with David, but you've been very careful. What kind of things have you said to him? What kind of discussions have you had?
Well, when he was first allocated Sophie, he did a bit of a eye roll, and I did say, everything all right there, David? Everything all right? And he was a bit like, oh yeah, it's fine. And I thought, okay, maybe I just read that wrong, and I could have done, and so I called that out, and he was like, no, everything's fine. And then I had said to him in supervision, not seeing much writing about Sophie, is everything all right? And he's sort of just fluffed it and changed the subject a little bit. And I think because I've been on the back foot and being anxious, I haven't wanted to push it and then run the risk of grievances and all the rest of it, I guess.
Okay. It's okay, thank you. So I'm going to play. We're going to run over time a little bit, not by much. So if you can bear with us, thanks for the thumbs up. That's excellent. And it's asking you to consider what skills did Jenny use to introduce the concerns to David? How does Jenny use the graces to frame a difficult conversation? How does the social graces support David to develop his thinking and identify the conflicts he's experiencing? And what are your key reflections from this example? Again, thinking about the key things. So they're meeting up to consider what David's work with Sophie. Okay.
I know we've got supervision next week, but I wanted to have a chat with you about Sophie.
Right.
Because I'm just wondering how you are.
Sorry, Jenny. So this isn't supervision?
Well, it's not like a formal supervision. What I wanted to do was let me finish.
Sorry.
Was to have a catch up because I wanted to see where you were up to in terms of the work you're doing with Sophie. And what I wanted to do was dedicate some time just to talk about Sophie and the work you've been doing with her.
Okay.
So I just kind of wanted a bit of a feedback from you. How do you feel that you're working with her? How do you think it's going? That sort of stuff, really.
I mean, obviously, you think that it's not going very well because we're sat here now having a conversation. I don't really understand Sophie, if I'm to be honest. I'm trying to, but I find it very difficult. I'm at odds with a lot of things in this job, and in particular with this case. So it's not. I think, you know, Jenny, I try and do the best job that I can do with everybody that I'm allocated.
Mhm.
I have quite strong views around certain things, and I'm trying to not make it about me. I'm trying to park those up. But they're, you know, they're a prominent part of my life. So, you know, it's hard.
Mhm. And I think you've been really brave calling it out for yourself there, David. Honestly, I really do. And it's not that I think things aren't going great. I just have seen a real difference in, usually when you're talking about the clients that you're working with, you know, you've got quite high energy, you're dead professional, you know, you're one of the team's shining stars, you know, and I talk a lot to Jeremy about, you know, I'm really proud to be working with you, that you're a really valued member of the team. So it's felt quite different with the work that you're doing with Sophie.
That I might not be the right person for Sophie.
Mm-hmm. So I'm interested again because you've worked with gay and lesbian couples and have had none of these feelings that I've been aware of. And I think I'm going to just pop up the Graces model. Do you know about the Graces model?
Yeah, of course.
So it's thinking about, you know, where you sit within this, but also where Sophie fits within this and what might be most important to her and what might well be most important to you. And I guess my interest is, because please don't see it as a challenge or anything else. I'm genuinely interested. What is it that's different with the gay couples that you've worked with versus the difficulties in working with Sophie?
You're not going to like this. You're not going to like it, but it's for the same reason that I have an issue with genetically modified crops.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing God. You're messing with the pinnacle of God's work.
Mm-hmm.
Humans, we're made in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for me and for, you know, the people that I belong to, if you like, in want of better words,
Mm-hmm.
that's sacrilege.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, that's against God. And that's a very, very strong feeling that we have.
Do you think Sophie may have picked up on your feelings towards her?
Yes, yes. And, you know, I think my defensiveness at the start is that I feel like I'm coming up short and it's not something I'm comfortable with. And what makes me even more comfortable is that it's obvious to Sophie that I have an issue. I don't know if she knows what it. I'm pretty certain that she knows it's because of the fact that she's trans. But I don't. You know, I've not preached or anything like that. I've not. You know, tried to force my beliefs onto Sophie or anything like that. So I don't know if Sophie understands the motivation behind it, which concerns me more because I guess, you know, I don't know. I'm conflicted. I don't know.
And it's one of those things that, you know, when we go out and we see clients or potential clients, we're doing our assessments, there's huge chunks of us that we almost have to put in our bag by the door so that they don't come out on that assessment with us. And, you know, some good bits we might want to keep, you know, that we're shaped and molded by our childhood, by our culture, our religion, our families, all of those sorts of things. And we'll be able to take some really good stuff with us, but it's how comfortable or confident are we about checking the stuff that might be a hindrance to us as social workers at the door when we're going in to do assessments?
Yeah, and that I guess that's what I'm struggling with is that separation, how I do that in this instance.
I'm going to ask you a really blunt question.
Okay.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to deal with it, or would you rather just put it in a box and pretend it's not there?
It's like both at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
It's like I know that if I want to continue to call myself a social worker, this is something I've got to get past. But at the same time, how do I yeah, I don't even know what the question is in regards to how I get the two to marry up, you know.
And I guess that's why I asked you whether you actually wanted to. And it's really interesting because, again, I'm seeing the professional and the personal. Conflict's the wrong word, but that interplay, isn't it? It's that dichotomy bit where, well, actually, this is me. I'm a devout Christian. This is my belief system. But actually, I'm also, as a social worker, I'm very inclusive. I'm very welcoming. I'm non-judgmental, and that's the dichotomy, isn't it, for you?
Yeah.
If you were me, what would you be thinking? What would you be suggesting?
You see, my issue with that kind of phrasing, right? And I've heard that my whole career, if I was you or if you were me, and we use it with people that we support, don't we, quite often, is that I'm not, right? And I'm me. So I can't put myself into somebody else's mindset with it. And I think that's part of the issue. If it was just a simple case of pretending that I felt differently about something, then it wouldn't be a concern. I got into this kind of work because I have fundamental beliefs around certain things, social justice being one of them. And I know that seems contrary, but I just can't. I can't put myself into a mindset of where that is acceptable. I just can't. I've tried and I can't. And that's what I'm struggling with ultimately.
So we've got, and I guess the reason you're asked that question is, and I completely respect your response, but it's a bit of, do you know what, if you were able to make the decision about what to do in this situation, what would it be?
Well, I mean, I obviously want to be able to do my job effectively for everybody. So yeah, I mean, what I want is what I've just said that I can't do really, is to be able to get to a place where I can do it, but disconnect it from, other thought processes that go on in my mind, around it.
Because sometimes I guess whether it might just be Sophie herself, so not Sophie's beliefs or Sophie's, gender identity or her trans position, but it might just be her as a person that you're not resonating with.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. But I think maybe I've contributed to that by being a little bit, or being, obviously standoffish about certain things, or it might have come across as disregarding of certain things, maybe. But I just didn't know how to respond, I guess. I just